Okay, so starting with number 18, I'm going to start off by writing that with my imaginary numbers. So that's going to be I root 2 times root 8 minus I root 2. And we can multiply that by our complex conjugate of our denominator. So that'll be root 8 plus I root 2 over root 8 plus I root 2. So we're going to take that I root 2 in the numerator and distribute that across. So that will give us, let's see, so we can write that down here. So that's going to give us I root 16 plus I squared root 4. Okay, now in my denominator, I can use my shortcut. So remember, we would do our first squared plus our last squared. So your first squared, well, your first is root 8. And so if you do a root 8, so we're going to do root 8 squared plus my last, which is root 2, and we square that. Well, that's just going to turn into 8 plus 2, which is 10. So then 10 is our new denominator. Okay, now the square root of 16 is 4, so I'm going to have 4i. This I squared turns into a negative, so we have a negative there, and then root 4 is 2. And then this is all over 10. We would really prefer to write this with our real number first. So we'll rewrite this as negative 2 plus 4i over 10. And then we're going to divide, all of these are even, so we can divide all of those by 2. And we'll get negative 1 plus 2i over 5. And you can leave your answer like that, or if you want to split it up, you can write this as negative 1/5 plus 2/5 I, and that's perfectly correct as well. So let's go down and take a look at 19, and I started this, but we're going to erase all of this and start it again, so we can talk about what we're doing here. So we'll start off by rewriting this with our imaginary numbers. So we're going to have I root 3 over root 12 minus I root 6, okay? And so we multiply by our complex conjugate, which is just going to be root 12 plus I root 6. So exact same thing as my denominator, but I flip the sign, and I have the same thing. I'm multiplying by the same thing in the numerator and the denominator. So now I take my I root 3 and distribute that across. So that'll give me I root 36 plus I squared root 18. So right, if they're square roots, you can just multiply them and put them under one radical. And then to multiply our denominator, we can use our shortcut. So we do first squared. So that becomes root 12 squared plus last squared. So that'll be root 6 squared. So this is just going to be 12 plus 6, which is 18. Okay, so now we can go ahead and simplify this. So the square root of 36 is 6, so we'll get a 6i. I squared is a negative, and then root 18, well, let's rewrite that as 9 times 2, right? And this is all over 18, okay? Now, this negative root 9 times 2, that's the real number in our numerator, so we're going to write that first, and we can go ahead and simplify that all at the same time. So we've got the negative out in front. The square root of 9 is 3, so we can pull that out. And the 2 on the inside, we can't do anything with that, so we'll leave that inside our square root. And then we have this plus 6i. So what I did was I simplified it, and I reordered it all in one step. And then this is all divisible by 18. Now, negative 3, 6, and 18 are all divisible by 3, so we can reduce all of those to lowest terms, divide all of them by 3, and we'll have a negative root 2 plus 2i all over 6. And if you were to leave it like this, I would give you full credit. Your textbook will go ahead and say negative root 2 over 6 plus 2, 6i. And then if you do that, well, you have to take it one step further, because this 2, 6, you can simplify that to 1/3. And that's what your textbook would do, and that's what you should do if you take this step. So then that becomes 1/3 I. Okay? So either one of these circled answers gets you full credit. Let's go on. Let's take a look at 21. Okay? Let's see. So for 21, our complex conjugate is going to be 2 minus I. So multiply by 2 minus I over 2 minus I, okay? So we're going to have to FOIL our numerators. This is the first example like this that we've seen so far today. That's okay, though. So we just FOIL it as though we would FOIL anything else. So our first, 3 times 2 is 6. My outers, that'll be a negative 3I. My last, that'll be, or I'm sorry, my inners, that'll be negative 4I. And then my last, that'll be, let's see, a positive 2I squared. Okay, now we can take our shortcut for our denominator. So first squared, that'll be 2 squared. And then last, well, last is just a number hiding in front of I, which is 1. So 1 squared, so we get 4 plus 1, which is 5. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and simplify this. So I'll have 6, negative 3I minus 4I, that's negative 7I. And then plus 2I squared, well, that I squared becomes a negative, so then that turns into minus 2. And then this is all over 5. Now, 6 minus 2 is 4, so we'll have 4 minus 7I over 5. Not 7, that should be 5. Okay, and that's our answer there. So let's go ahead and take a look at, let's take a look at 23. So for 23, our complex conjugate there is going to be 1 plus I. So we multiply by 1 plus I in our numerator and our denominator. And again, we'll have to FOIL our numerators. Okay, so our first 2 times 1 is 2. My outers, 2 times I, that'll be plus 2I. My inners, 5I times 1, so that'll be plus 5I. And then my last, 5I times I, that'll be plus 5I squared. Okay, and then we'll do our shortcut of first squared plus last squared. So my first is 1, and then my last, that number hiding in front of I, is also 1, so that's going to simplify to 2. Okay, so then we can simplify this. So let's see, we have a 2, and then 2I plus 5I is 7I, and then plus 5I squared, well, that I squared becomes a negative, so that turns into minus 5, and this is all over 2. And then one more step. So 2 minus 5 will have negative 3 plus 7I all over 2, and so that's your answer for 23. Let's go ahead and do 24. So for 24, our complex conjugate will be 2 plus I. So we'll multiply our numerator and our denominator by 2 plus I. Okay. So up top, if we FOIL that, so let's see. So pretend that we have parentheses here, and so my first 2 times 6 is 12. My outers, 6 times I is 6I. My inners, 5I times 2 is 10I, and then my last 5I times I is 5I squared, okay? And then we use our shortcut for down below. So remember, first squared plus last squared, so that's going to be 2 squared plus, and then the number hiding in front of I, that'll be 1. So we have 4 plus 1, which is 5, so that's our new denominator there. Okay, so we're going to simplify this. So I have 12, and then 6I plus 10I, 16I, and then 5I squared minus 5. That'll turn into a minus 5 because, remember, quick review, I squared is the same thing as negative 1, and then this is all over 5. Okay, so simplifying this, well, 12 minus 5 is 7 plus 16I all over 5, and we're all done. So that's it for the examples in 754, the second day of this. So hopefully you can go ahead and finish your homework after this.